Hi everyone, Effie here. Today I'm going to show you how to make this very easy one-layer holiday card using our Holiday Bows stamp set. I've already set up my Misty with some cardstock and I've put the first layer bows onto my Misty. So I am just stamping them first in mint julep ink, and I'm taking the 4 different sizes and I'm stamping them all over my A2 size cardstock. I'm speeding up the video here because I'm just stamping the entire front of the cardstock with the first layer. I did post an in-depth video tutorial on how to layer these bows, and I'll make sure to link it in the YouTube description below. I'm using my Misty to position most of the bows on my card panel because I find it easier to stamp them all at once. However, once I finish stamping most of this card base, I'm going to take an acrylic block and stamp some of the first layer stamps individually to get into the tight corners that I can't get into with my Misty. After I finish stamping the first layer of the bows, I'm going to prep my card base to stamp the second layer of the bows. Our holiday bow set does come with a layering guide. I've also posted the layering tutorial on YouTube, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to prep the second layer onto my card base, and then I'm going to close the cover of my Misty on the stamps. And I'm just going to ink it up with some Hero Arts Pool ink. Then I'm going to close the cover of my Misty over my card base, and it's going to stamp the second layer right over the first layer because the Misty is a really great stamp positioning tool. So I'm just going to finish stamping the second layer of the bows all over the first layer images on my card base. After I finish stamping the second layer of the bows that are more towards the inside of the card panel, I'm going to take an acrylic block and stamp the second layer individually on the bows that are on the outer edges. Once you get the hang of layering these bows, they're really easy to stamp, and the effect that you get is so effortless. So this was a really fun card for me to make, and it was really quick to create as well. I'm going to finish stamping off the second layers with an acrylic block as opposed to my Misty because it was hard to position all of the stamps on the outer edges on my Misty. So I'm just going to take an acrylic block and I'm going to individually stamp the second layers for the bows that are on the outer edges of my card panel. Now that the stamping of the bows phase of this card is finished, I'm going to take my heat gun and just zap the entire panel with some heat to make sure that the panel is completely dry. I want to make sure that there is no moisture from the ink left on the panel because I'm going to be doing some heat embossing for the sentiment. I've gone ahead and positioned the sentiment stamp on my card panel. I'm using the sentiment from our holiday lyric set, and I'm using the It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year stamp. After positioning the stamp, I'm going to ink the stamp up with some Versamark ink, but before I close the cover of my Misty, I'm going to prep my card panel with an anti-static powder tool, and this will prevent all the embossing powders from sticking where I don't want it to stick. Then I'm going to close the cover of my Misty and I'm going to stamp the sentiment in the Versamark ink right onto my card panel. And the Versamark ink is really just a sticky ink which the embossing powders will stick to. Then I'm going to take some gold tinsel embossing powder from Ranger, and then I'm going to pour some of the powder onto where I had stamped the sentiment in the Versamark. After tapping off the excess powders, I'm going to take my heat gun and just melt the embossing powder. To minimize the warping to your card panel, you want to make sure that you heat up your heat gun for a few seconds before applying the heat to your card base or your panel. Now, I didn't do this on camera, but I took my card panel and I adhered it onto a side folding card base to complete the card. And this is the finished card. I hope you enjoyed today's video. It was a really quick and simple holiday card to make. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.